The U.S. National Defense Budget request for fiscal year 2026 is over $1 trillion. First time in history it's ever been that high. The Pentagon hasn't released a full breakdown of where exactly all that money is going, but based on what's publicly available, we have a pretty good idea. All right, let's start with the nuts and bolts. Of the $1.01 trillion being requested for U.S. national defense, $961 billion will go straight to the Department of Defense, which breaks down into these buckets. $197 billion for the Army, $292 billion for the Department of the Navy, which includes the Marines, $301 billion for the Air and Space Forces, and another $170 billion for defense-wide activities. However, only $848 billion of the $961 billion request is through the discretionary budget. The other $113.3 billion would need to come from a congressional reconciliation bill. All in, the request represents a 13% increase over last year, but that doesn't mean the average service member will necessarily feel the impacts from the increase.
My sense is that the services will actually feel it's a little bit tighter because the way that really comes together is the services, I think, are looking at like an 8% kind of baseline reduction that's going to hit, and the reconciliation plus that 8% that's kind of come off is going to go towards administration priorities.
Mark Wetherington is a retired Air Force Lieutenant General and the former Deputy Commander of U.S. Global Strike Command. The 8% reduction he's referring to is the previously announced mandate from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth that all military branches would need to find ways to free up around 8% of their budgets to go towards President Trump's national defense priorities. Think shipbuilding, expanding the defense industrial base so that the U.S. can build thousands of drones quickly, modernizing the nuclear triad, and of course, expanding the Space Force.
I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. If I was to describe it, I would say space, cyberspace, information are domains or aspects of warfare that are going to grow in relevance for the next 100 years, right? And so not that they're the most important, not that that's the only thing you have to do, but every year for the next century, those things will be more relevant on outcomes, war fighting outcomes.
Golden Dome, the name given to President Donald Trump's initiative to establish a nationwide missile defense system, will receive a $25 billion boost in funding, but only if both the discretionary budget and reconciliation bill are approved.
Something that's interesting is the Golden Dome down payment is part of the reconciliation bill, but it is not part of the initial budget request. So what is interesting from an analytical perspective is there has been much talk about the significance of the Golden Dome project, how it's very important for the United States to proceed with this. But it's curious why they would include that as the reconciliation project and not within the defense budget itself.
Mark Timnitsky is a non-resident fellow with the Atlantic Council. He's also a freelance journalist with 10 years of experience covering global national defense issues. He says a $1 trillion defense budget was always going to make headlines, but there is more nuance surrounding the issue given the current political climate.
While the defense budget is larger than it was in the last fiscal year, there are still federal employees and government contractors, specifically for the Department of Defense, who are having their positions terminated or eliminated because of DOGE efforts. So it's very interesting to see how will these breakdowns within the defense budget impact other, not only just servicemen and women, but federal employees and contractors working in these realms.
Employees and contractors who could be working on programs like the modernization of the U.S. nuclear triad, which is slated to see about $60 billion in fiscal year 2026. Included in that is just over $10 billion to speed up deliveries on the B-21 Raider program, the sixth-generation stealth bomber set to replace the B-2 Spirit. The Columbia-class submarine program will rake in $11 billion next year, and Sentinel, America's replacement for the Minuteman III ICBM, will see about $4 billion.
Minuteman III is a great example, right? Fielded in 1980, was supposed to be 10-year service life, and now we're 40 years into that 10-year service life, and still capable, still ready, but it's increasingly difficult to sustain it and to keep it ready to do the things it needs to do. And so we kicked all those things down to the same point in time. If we would have been smarter about it, we would have modernized the missile, the bomber, and the submarine legs at different points in time.
To make sure the U.S. doesn't kick drones down the road, for the first time ever, the Department of Defense created a separate budget line for autonomy and autonomous systems, to the tune of $13.4 billion.
Commercial technology has reached such a form of maturity that our enemies and our adversaries have access to technologies that once only aerospace really surrounded, right?
Ryan Gurry is the president and CEO of Performance DroneWorks. PDW's C-100 is part of the Army's Small Uncrewed Aircraft Systems program of record, and Gurry says they're ready to compete for more.
We're growing faster than we really can handle, and I think that's indicative of what the Army's intent is. They're looking for fast iteration. They're looking for very inexpensive, scalable systems that are designed for manufacturing.
The ability to integrate new and emerging technologies quickly, or at the speed of relevancy, as generals like to say, is vital in today's defensive landscape. Because those days of the U.S. taking decades to develop new weapons are long gone.
This is a new era where inexpensive, one-time use robotics will really lead the way. And I think that the U.S. is doing a great job understanding that and moving with incredible speed to adapt.
The DoD's 2026 budget request and the reconciliation bill both still need to pass Congress. The fiscal year ends on September 30th. For more unbiased, straight fact reporting like this, download the Straight Arrow News app today.